disagree and still be friends, right? Yeah. About pizza toppings, not about racism. Discussions around political impartiality, political neutrality, and the idea that politics should not define friendships has been rife over the past few years, particularly in the West. This is likely due to the polarisation of politics, the pandemic, the change in political parties in the United Kingdom, the rise of right-wing populism, and let's not forget the United States presidential election campaigns. In fact, I remember comments like this in Trump's first election campaign, his second, and his third. It's almost as if people are concerned about a felon being in office, especially in one of the world's leading economies. And political impartiality is something that I've had to reckon with my own career and with my behaviour online. After I started university, for example, I started putting things like opinions on my own in my bio, retweets and likes and reposts and not endorsements and yada yada yada. In fact, I remember a boy in my year in school, love it if you're watching, calling me out and thinking it was a real gotcha moment when he memed on me for putting this in my bio. Unbeknownst to him, this was actually encouraged by academics and lecturers at university because the topics I was discussing and posting due to my drama degree were actually quite political. Because yes, who would have thought that drama of all things, would be political? Everything's political nowadays, even pretending to be a tree. There are many careers and institutions that require this idea of political impartiality. Political impartiality refers to the principle that decisions, especially those made by public officials or institutions, should be based on objective and relevant criteria without bias or favouritism toward any political party or ideology. This ensures that individuals are treated equitably and that personal political beliefs do not influence official judgments or actions. And though I cover a range of political topics, I do make efforts to educate and apply theories that are not my own or views that I may not necessarily agree with. In fact, a major reason why I took a break from YouTube and content creation in general was being bound to this political impartiality, which I still am in the job that I work in. So just know, although I do cover feminist ideology and I do agree with the equality of the genders and strive for equality for all people, I'm not saying that I agree or condone all of the views or ideologies that I cover, or that my political views are the right views. Though I'd like to think, any view that's protecting human rights is a right view. That disclaimer will hopefully keep me in employment if they ever find this channel. And though political impartiality and neutrality are essential in certain fields, it can be really difficult to make peace with almost suppressing your political beliefs in a world where politics is everything. And the pressure to fight for justice for those who are suffering is ever more prevalent. So why not discuss it in a video? As mentioned, political impartiality is a foundational principle in democratic societies, emphasising that decisions, specifically those made by public officials and institutions, should be based on an objective criteria without bias towards any political party or ideology. On the one hand, this can ensure that your political views don't impact your employability, because how does the way that you vote in general elections affect your capability to change a tyre or serve someone in a restaurant or perform surgery? It can also protect those in your service, because at the end of the day, healthcare is a human right? And should be accessible to all, regardless of your political standing. Right? But unfortunately, in our current political climate and with the various tragedies that are happening all over the world, this is not a global viewpoint that is respected. Political impartiality ensures that public institutions operate fairly, fostering a trust amongst their citizens. In governance, impartiality is crucial in maintaining the legitimacy of democratic processes. As noted in the Florida Law Review, judicial impartiality encompasses procedural fairness, public confidence, and ethical conduct. But again, many may argue that this is not always followed through. Cough cough, felon in office, cough cough. In the media, impartial reporting provides the public with balanced information, enabling informed decision making. The British Broadcasting Corporation, or the BBC to those of us in Britain, is meant to adhere to strict impartiality guidelines to ensure that diverse viewpoints are covered. However, challenges arise when impartiality is interpreted as mere balance, potentially limiting the range of voices on contentious issues. Despite the guidelines that many of these channels have to follow, media is still criticised for being too pro-government, too anti-government, over-reporting crimes by certain racial identities, under-reporting crimes by certain racial identities, and backing political parties during election campaigns. If you don't follow British politics, you wouldn't know that there's a common argument made about the Conservative campaign and the EU referendum. Tabloids and different news sources often pushed, and continues to do so, anti-immigrant sentiment. Consequently, the sentiment may argue that this led to a general sentiment that the UK needs to leave the EU, causing the EU referendum. It's almost as if leading an entire political campaign on the back of anti-immigration narratives will lead people of the country to, want some change regarding immigration. What do you know? Who would have thought that? Whilst I'm not saying that the media is the only thing responsible for this rhetoric that is basically dominating Britain at the moment, it is difficult to ignore its potential impact, with many explaining how influential the media is on shaping public opinion. If you want to learn more on such topics, I highly suggest you check out the channel Jimmy the Giant, who makes great videos, especially on British politics and, can actually have a political opinion. Political impartiality, folks. On the flip side, many have argued that Jeremy Corbyn's tenure as the leader of the UK Labour Party was marked by significant media scrutiny, and many analysts argue that this contributed to Labour's defeat in the 2019 UK election. The media's role encompassed underrepresentation of Corbyn's political stance, dissemination of smear campaigns, and propagation of misinformation. Studies have highlighted a disproportionate focus on negative aspects of Corbyn's leadership, often sidelining substantial discussions of his policies. Research from Loughborough University indicated that hostile press coverage aimed at the Labour Party during the 2019 election was more than double the intensity found during the 2017 poll. This suggests a media environment more focused on criticism than on policy analysis. Further analysis by the London School of Economics and Political Science examined media representations of Corbyn's rise as a candidate for Labour leadership. The study aimed to provide a sound, informed analysis of the various media representations of Corbyn, contributing to the ongoing public debate regarding the role of mainstream media in a democracy. Corbyn faced numerous smear campaigns, particularly allegations of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. While addressing these concerns, Corbyn did state that individuals promoting such theories did not represent his views. However, research found that his rebuttals often went unnoticed by the public, leading to a perception that he had not adequately addressed the issue. Additionally, media outlets were criticised for perpetuating these smears. Journalist Peter Oborne highlighted that any smear, regardless of its veracity, was often amplified by mainstream media, contributing to a narrative that undermined Corbyn's credibility. And the 2019 election was marred by instances of misinformation. Reports indicated that the campaign saw troubling levels of dirty tricks, including misleading claims and deceptive practices. Moreover, accusations of systemic media bias was prevalent. Critics argued that the BBC's election night coverage, for example, lacked meaningful discussion on parties' national vote shares, potentially skewing public perception. So all in all, though the media is expected to be impartial, we've explored many examples where they actually have not been. Educational institutions also bear the responsibility of political impartiality, ensuring that political issues are presented fairly to allow students to form their own views. The UK government's guidelines emphasise that schools must not promote partisan political views, ensuring a balanced education that respects diverse perspectives. As a teacher or a member of staff in education, it is important to understand the influence that you have over your pupils. When you help educate children all day, teaching them factually correct content or exploring interpretations of text in different mediums, you are helping them foster critical thinking skills and also process and remember information. When recounting the events of the First World War, for example, if you then went on to talk about your own political opinions and your views on political parties, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to assume that your students wouldn't take these as opinions, but as factually correct information. In educational settings, this means that we must present political issues fairly and without bias, allowing students to make their own opinions and form their own views. This concept is particularly important in personal, social, health, economics education, or PSHE. This is particularly relevant when discussing topics such as homophobia, transphobia, racism, equality, and political events. The online landscape is very polarised, so when someone makes or says an opinion that may have phobic underscores, they're often clowned on, criticised and hated on. However, in a learning environment where the purpose is to educate, it is important to discuss where these views come from, how damaging they can be, and help educate the youth of today on how to respect people from all walks of life. But that can be difficult, especially for those from marginalised backgrounds, and sometimes, as the adult in the room, that has to take the back foot when it comes to the greater good, such as the education of our children. The UK government guidance on political impartiality in schools emphasises that schools should not promote partisan political views in teaching. This means educators should not encourage pupils to support or adopt a one-sided view expressed with a political purpose. Whilst it's acceptable to teach about partisan political views, it's crucial to explore them in a balanced manner, ensuring that multiple perspectives are considered to provide a comprehensive understanding of the subject matter. And arguably, this is probably why when I studied history for my history GCSE and we looked at the 1930s Germany, the lessons weren't just about the atrocities that the Nazi Party committed. We also learnt about what led up to the election, the process in which these tragedies arose, and the political and economic landscape of the 1920s that led to the rise of fascism in Germany. And don't get me wrong, it's extremely important to condemn the events of what's happened in history. However, without a relevant backstory, we can run the risk of encouraging polarising views, and criticisms of countries' politics can become misinformed and oversimplified. Blaming the events of the 1930s and 1940s on Germany just being anti-Semitic, for example, is a vastly oversimplified view and can run the risk of us blaming a country's politics on the country or its people simply just being bad, which is prejudice within itself. And this is why political impartiality can be so important. It is not necessarily about avoiding political topics, but moreover, exploring the topics from a range of standpoints, ensuring that adequate context is given. However, political impartiality does not come without its cons. Neutrality in the face of injustice can be perceived as complicity. Impartiality may lead institutions to avoid taking stands on critical moral issues, resulting in inaction. As philosopher Gilbert K. Chesterton observed, impartiality is a pompous name for indifference, which is an elegant name for ignorance. On social media, this is definitely an ongoing sentiment, and it's important to acknowledge that it's almost like a privilege to be politically impartial, especially in your everyday life, because there are people out there whose very lives are politicised, and looking away or not sharing our thoughts and not engaging in discussions regarding the many tragedies happening in the world can make us complacent, and that complacency can further marginalise others. For example, Alyssa Hadley Dunn critiques strict adherence to neutrality in educational settings. She argues that avoiding political topics or withholding personal views can inadvertently marginalise students, suggesting that such neutrality may not serve the best interests of the student body. And this echoes my previous point around discussions about prejudice and discrimination. For example, imagine you're discussing LGBTQ+ identities in PSHE and a pupil makes a homophobic comment, whilst another pupil in the room who relates to this topic, maybe falling within that community themselves or with close friends or family within that sphere, gets upset about it. Neutrality in this situation may harm that pupil. Is neutrality the best decision in this case? Well, it's complicated. In schools in the UK, the Equality Act 2010 ensures that schools act in a way that does not lead to the discrimination against their pupils, yet criticising these views can be done in a neutral way. For example, taking the behaviour, or in this case an opinion, and criticising it is completely different to labelling a child as discriminatory or defining them by an opinion that is likely ill-informed and not fully representative of what that child actually believes or the potential that they have to believe something different. And of course, in schools, consequences are put in place when children use slurs and phobic language, especially when it's used towards others. And follow-up interventions do and should happen. So in actuality, this political neutrality is almost a paradox, as there are guidelines and laws that we follow in the UK that are not necessarily neutral and impartial when it comes to upholding human rights. The importance is, however, that our own personal opinions are not used as as gospel. Impartiality may also discourage institutions from advocating for social change, even when necessary. This stance can stifle progress on civil rights or environmental protection. For example, educational institutions that strictly adhere to impartiality might avoid discussions on pressing social matters, which then can hinder students' critical engagement with these topics. And some topics, such as climate change and human rights, do not have equally balanced viewpoints. This is particularly evident when it comes to discussing current matters, such as the ongoing tragedy in Gaza. It can be particularly difficult for institutions and individuals that are part of those institutions to make comments on matters without facing accusations of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, or face accusations of being supportive and complacent in general. In a situation where criticism will inevitably arise, it can seem better to just do nothing. But in years to come, will this complacency be viewed through an understanding lens, or will the criticism of indifference haunt these institutions as they have when looking at past regimes? And in reality, when looking at these kinds of events, is our public image really that important when it comes to fighting injustice? I'm not making any opinions, I'm just asking a question. Outside of areas where this political ambiguity or impartiality or neutrality makes sense, such as following government guidelines, how can political neutrality be received? And is neutrality even possible? Whilst we can avoid giving our direct opinions, our retweets, reposts, likes, dislikes, and decisions will ultimately inform and paint a picture of our opinions. And sometimes our private views can overspill into public fora. There are two ideas I want to discuss here. One, the role of social media in impartiality, and two, political neutrality in relationships. The discourse surrounding political neutrality on social media platforms, particularly Twitter, or rebranded as X, it is still Twitter to me and it will always be Twitter, has been a topic of extensive debate. Elon Musk, the owner of X and lover of salutes, has made public statements and emphasised the importance of neutrality for the platform. In April 2022, he tweeted the following tweet: "For Twitter to deserve public trust, it must be politically neutral, which effectively means upsetting the far right and the far left equally. However, Musk's subsequent actions, such as endorsing Republican candidates during the US midterm elections, has led to criticisms and questions about the platform's commitment to neutrality." And in my own experience, I have often clicked on left-wing content and tweets, and I've only been met with right-wing responses. And though, yeah, like a lot of the time when you're part of a political group, you may actively go towards the other political group and try and clown on them or prove them wrong and bring people over to your side. But Twitter used to, at least, act like an echo chamber. As someone who does not consume right-wing content, why would my algorithm push this despite being completely against the content that I consume? This has led to questions around what social media algorithms inevitably push and how it may be linked to the personal opinions of CEOs and the political candidates that they back. A study conducted by the Dublin City University's Anti-Bullying Centre examined how social media algorithms amplify misogynistic content to male users. Researchers set up 10 experimental accounts on blank smartphones, 5 on YouTube Shorts and 5 on TikTok, to track and analyse the content recommended to them. The findings revealed that all male-identified accounts were promptly exposed to masculinist, anti-feminist and other extremist content regardless of their prior engagement with such material. Once the accounts interacted with this content, the frequency of such recommendations increased significantly. Content featuring manfluencers or male influencers constituted the majority of the recommended videos. This research underscores the role of social media algorithms in promoting content that reinforces harmful gender stereotypes and misogynistic views among male users. Though many may argue that this is the fault of the algorithm or the AI, if an algorithm or AI is automatically suggesting this content despite no previous information other than gender, doesn't this imply that some kind of coding is going on that pushes politically polarized content? If these social media sites are as impartial as they claim to be, or if impartiality is as important as CEOs like Musk argue, then what is understands the meaning of this. This also goes back to the idea that political impartiality often encourages a balanced argument, but there are some political opinions that maybe should not have as much equal weight as others. Though we have freedom of speech, hate speech is not something itself that we should really give a platform to. In an educational setting where this can be decoded and tackled in a nurturing environment, perhaps political neutrality can be achieved. However, when it's on apps or media, they can be used as dog whistles. The openness to political opinions or the right to do certain gestures under the guise of giving their heart out to the crowd can often be detrimental to the equality and rights that we desperately need to uphold. And the debate whether people can be friends when they disagree with certain politics is a highly discussed topic, and there are understandable arguments on both sides. People are complex, and political beliefs are only one part of their identity. There's an idea that friendship should be based on mutual respect, and shared experiences and personal values should hold some weight rather than just political alignment. Engaging in civil discussions with friends who have different views can lead to a broader understanding of the world, challenge biases, and promote critical thinking. And some argue that politics, whilst important, doesn't necessarily impact everyday personal relationships, especially if these friends have connected over other interests like hobbies, music, or shared life experiences. And this can actually attribute to, family relationships or relationships that you have with your colleagues in the workspace. A functioning democracy thrives when people with opposing views can still engage respectfully, and maintaining friendships across ideological lines does foster empathy and reduces political polarization. However, this all comes with its own criticisms. Many people believe that political views are not just opinions, but fundamental reflections of morality, justice, and human rights. If a friend holds views that contradict deep-held moral beliefs, well, that friendship may be unsustainable. There's kind of a difference between disagreeing over the fact that internet should be available to all and the idea that certain people should not be allowed to exist in society. For marginalised communities, certain political beliefs such as opposition to the LGBTQ+ rights, immigration policies, or racial injustice issues can directly affect their lives and safety. And some argue that by choosing to remain neutral or maintaining friendships with those who support harmful policies, it's almost like a passive endorsement of these policies, making it difficult to separate personal and political matters. And this goes back to that argument about complicity. It is a privilege to be able to not be affected by these events that may really affect someone else from a different community to you. All in all, there are environments where political impartiality does have its perks, where it is understandable, and where it needs to be upheld for the greater good. However, in our everyday life, that can be challenging. In the adult world, you are going to come across people that think differently from you, and it's not as simple as just cutting them out, especially when you enter workspaces that have a range of different people from different backgrounds and different ages. Your politics aren't always going to align, but in the world of online activism, it's not as simple as that. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I kind of have to dance around my own opinions when it comes to this, but hopefully you've got a well-rounded and politically impartial account of politically impartiality, or political impartiality. I've said that word so many times I don't even know how to say it anymore. Give me a like and subscribe if you're new, and with that, I'll see you soon.